Ryan Baxter's day had been the very definition of exhausting. From the moment he woke before dawn, he'd been on his feet, juggling back-to-back meetings at the marketing firm where he worked. The fluorescent lights and stale coffee of the office had done little to ease his fatigue, and the constant ping of emails on his phone was a relentless reminder that productivity never truly paused. By the time he finally slipped into his car late in the evening, Ryan's muscles ached, and his mind felt like it was running on fumes. He drove through the dimly lit streets of Greenvale, where the sidewalks were empty and the houses sat serenely in the glow of porch lights. At last, he turned onto Green Brook Trail. Ryan's home, number 22, was a modest, single-story dwelling with peeling shutters and a small front yard that needed more attention than he cared to admit. Still, whenever he caught sight of it, a sense of relief washed over him. In many ways, that little house was his refuge, the one place where he could drop his guard and just breathe. He parked in the short driveway, turning off the engine and letting the silence envelop him for a moment. The engine's ticking was the only sound cutting through the hush of the late hour. As he stepped outside, a cool evening breeze brushed against his face. It wasn't much, but it signaled that his long day was finally drawing to a close. Normally, he would have paused to enjoy the night sky, or at least to stretch his aching limbs, but his weariness spurred him straight toward the front door. The modest front porch had a single overhead light that illuminated the path. Ryan fished around in his pocket for his keys, wanting nothing more than to sink into the couch with a glass of water and maybe mindlessly scroll through social media until his eyelids grew heavy. The day had been draining, yes, but at least he was home. He clicked the lock open, pushing the door in with a sigh. The interior greeted him with a familiar stillness, and a faint mix of scents, old coffee grounds and the lingering aroma of morning toast, hung in the air. Usually, it felt welcoming. Tonight, though, something didn't sit right. He couldn't pinpoint the source of his unease, but as he looked around, a distant apprehension tugged at the back of his thoughts. On any other evening, Ryan might have brushed off the feeling as leftover anxiety from work. Yet he couldn't shake the notion that something was off. Rather than ignore it, he set his keys on the small table by the door and took a moment to scan his surroundings. The living room was exactly as he'd left it, and nothing appeared out of place. Still, the unease remained. Exhaling, he reminded himself that he was likely just tired. Tomorrow would be another day, another uphill battle at the office, but for now, all he needed was rest. Little did he know that the next few moments would unravel the quiet he so desperately craved, setting the stage for an encounter he would never forget. Despite his exhaustion, Ryan Baxter found himself suddenly alert when he glanced through the front window. Something out there, beyond his modest porch light, shifted in the darkness. At first, he assumed it might be a stray cat or a neighborhood dog sniffing around. But the shadowy form was too tall and upright to be an animal. He moved closer to the window, peering cautiously through a thin gap in the blinds. To his surprise, he spotted a person, a woman, standing near his mailbox at the end of his short driveway. She seemed completely absorbed in some task. Alarm jolted Ryan's senses awake. Who would be out there at this hour? Inching open the front door, he stepped onto the porch. The overhead light barely reached the mailbox, but he could discern that the woman was fiddling with something on it. "Hello," he called, his voice carrying a note of apprehension. "Can I help you?" The woman jumped slightly before turning to face him. In the weak glow, Ryan saw her features, late 30s or early 40s, neatly dressed in a blazer and slacks, with her hair pulled back in a tidy ponytail. In her hand, she held a small hammer and a packet of metal digits. Ryan's mind raced. Metal digits? "Do you live here?" she asked, sounding more annoyed than startled. "I'm sorry, but there's been a mix-up with the addresses. The city apparently assigned the wrong number. This house should be listed as 24, Green Brook Trail, not 22. Ryan blinked in confusion. "What are you talking about? I've lived here for 4 years. It's always been number 22. The woman huffed, balancing the hammer and digits against her hip. "Look, I don't know what to tell you. My name's Allison Whitmore. I work with the city's administrative services. There was a clerical error, and I'm just here to correct it. 100 thoughts blitzed through Ryan's mind. Why hadn't he been notified if there was an official correction? City errors didn't typically result in someone showing up late at night to hammer new numbers onto a private mailbox. Plus, his mortgage documents, his mail, even his bills, all identified the house as 22. This didn't add up. He took a few steps forward, the porch light illuminating his path. "Look, Ms. Whitmore," he said, trying to stay polite despite his growing alarm, "I've never heard about this supposed mistake. And I certainly wasn't informed that anyone would come tampering with my mailbox tonight." Allison rolled her eyes. "Paperwork gets lost sometimes. I'm sure you'll receive a notice soon, but I'm here now, so let me do my job. It won't take long." She turned back to the mailbox, raising her hammer, and before Ryan could fully process the situation, she pried off the metal "2" from the mailbox. Ryan's pulse spiked. This was his property. Even if there had been an error, no city official had the right to alter his address without proper notification, or at a more appropriate hour. "Stop," he said firmly. Stepping off the porch, he positioned himself between Allison and the mailbox. "You can't just change my house number in the middle of the night. I need documentation or some official paperwork." Allison pursed her lips. "Official paperwork? Fine. I'll get it. But don't blame me when the post office starts mixing up your mail tomorrow." Her tone dripped with condescension. Ryan's heart thudded in his chest. He had no idea who this woman really was or why she was so insistent on replacing his address digits. But if she thought he'd just stand by and let her proceed, she was mistaken. Exhaustion forgotten, Ryan steeled himself for a confrontation. Something was amiss, and he intended to get to the bottom of it, even if it meant facing this stranger head-on. Allison Whitmore's composure cracked the moment Ryan Baxter refused to let her continue. Under the dim porch light, Ryan could see frustration flare in her eyes, turning them cold. She placed the new metal digits on top of the mailbox as though claiming temporary ownership. Then, folding her arms, she regarded Ryan with a mixture of annoyance and challenge. "I'm doing you a favor," she claimed, her voice climbing in pitch. "Trust me, the city doesn't like it when residents obstruct official corrections. We had a meeting about these address errors just last week, and I'm the one tasked with fixing them." Ryan took a slow breath, trying to keep his own temper under control. "I get you might be trying to help," he said evenly, though the suspicion in his mind was growing. "But it's after 10 at night. I've received zero notification about any address change. And quite frankly, it's illegal for you to alter my property without my consent." Allison's jaw tightened. "Don't talk to me about illegal. I know how these bureaucratic errors happen, and I've been hired to correct them. It's not my fault if the city is behind on their mail notifications." "Then show me some ID or official documentation," Ryan challenged, keeping his gaze locked on her. "If this is legitimate, I'm sure you have something to back it up." She bristled at his demand, rummaging through her blazer pocket but producing only a smartphone and a business card that bore no official seal, just her name and a vague mention of municipal consulting. When Ryan read it, he saw nothing that tied her to any recognized city department. No logos, no references, just a bland card with a phone number. "That's not enough," he said, handing it back. "I need actual proof from City Hall. This piece of paper could have been printed by anyone." Allison's face reddened, and she snatched the card away. "You're being uncooperative. I have every right to do my job without harassment." Ryan felt a wave of incredulity. "Harassment? You're on my property, in the dark, trying to rip off my house numbers. How else am I supposed to react?" She opened her mouth to retort, then closed it. A tense silence stretched, punctuated only by distant traffic noise from a nearby road. Finally, she spoke, her voice low and measured. "You know what? I'm done arguing. If you're going to block official business, I have no choice but to call the police. Let them decide who's in the wrong here. Her threat hung in the air like a storm cloud about to burst. Ryan's pulse quickened. The last thing he wanted was a police confrontation in the middle of the night. Especially one that could be twisted into some version of him causing trouble on his own property. Yet he refused to be intimidated. Call them, he said, shrugging to mask the knot forming in his stomach. But don't expect them to take your side when they see that you have no real authority or paperwork to be doing this. Allison whipped out her phone, her glare fixed on him. Fine. Don't say I didn't warn you. I'm not the bad guy here. She dialed, pressing the phone to her ear. Ryan could only hear snippets of her conversation, words like trespassing, refusing, and threatening. His heart sank at how she was framing the situation. Her narrative painted him as the aggressor, while she posed as the innocent municipal worker. While she spoke, Ryan's mind churned through potential outcomes. Could she actually be telling the truth? Perhaps there was some obscure city error. But every fiber of his being insisted that something was off. Her nighttime arrival, her curt manner, and that shady business card all signaled that she was no typical government contractor. When Allison ended the call, she shot Ryan a triumphant smirk. They're on their way, she said, crossing her arms again. We'll see how defiant you are when the cops show up. Ryan steadied himself. I have nothing to hide. This is my house. My address has always been 22. I'm not the one in the wrong. Allison sneered, stepping back from the mailbox with a theatrical flourish. Go ahead and hold on to your precious 22 for now, she said, the sarcasm in her tone biting. But once they get here, I'll show them how you tried to obstruct me, and we'll see whose story they believe. The sound of tires on pavement drew their attention. One of the neighbors, presumably returning from an evening out, slowed his car as he passed, staring at the strange scene, a woman in business attire, a man in his casual clothes, both standing tensely in the driveway next to a half-removed mailbox digit. Ryan flushed, wishing this confrontation hadn't become a spectacle. But the neighbor didn't linger, the car continued down the street, leaving darkness and tension in its wake. With every passing second, the tension climbed. Ryan realized that if the police arrived and only heard Allison's version of events, especially any false claims about harassment or threats, the situation could spiral. But he refused to cower. This was his home, and he had every right to keep someone from vandalizing it. His thoughts swirled, half formulating a plan to document everything. If she was willing to lie on the phone, who knew what else she would claim when officers arrived? Clutching his phone, Ryan resolved to gather proof of his innocence. He wouldn't be caught unprepared in a, he said, she said, scenario. Allison seemed unfazed, glancing at her smartphone as though checking for updates from the authorities. Ryan watched her, a cocktail of anger and apprehension swirling within him. He had no idea how this would end, but he was certain of one thing: he wouldn't let anyone, city official or otherwise, tamper with his property without proper cause. If the police needed clarity, then clarity they would get. Allison Whitmore had ended her phone call, but the ringing alarm of Ryan Baxter's anxiety continued echoing in his chest. The air felt charged, like a static field before a thunderstorm, as he tried to piece together what she might have told the 911 operator. From the fragments he overheard, accusations of trespassing and aggression, it was clear she intended to cast herself as the victim. Ryan, still standing near the mailbox with the half-removed number in his hand, replayed their brief confrontation in his mind. He hadn't threatened her or encroached on her personal space. He had simply insisted she stop tampering with his property until she provided legitimate proof of her authority. Yet to a stranger on the other end of a 911 call, the situation might sound entirely different. His stomach churned at the realization that Allison had employed certain coded phrases. Though she hadn't outright mentioned race, the undertones were difficult to miss. Phrases like, "he's being aggressive," and "he won't let me do my job," were enough to raise a red flag in the deeply ingrained social narrative. Ryan couldn't escape the sobering thought, in the eyes of some, his presence alone could be misconstrued as a threat. He glanced down at his skin. He'd had enough experiences to know that a black man being labeled as aggressive could end in disastrous ways when the police arrived. The sobering possibility weighed heavily on him. He had no illusions about how quickly things could escalate if the responding officers believed Allison's story. The phrase, racial dog whistles, popped into his head. He didn't want to believe this was about race, but her choice of words, her tone, something about it hinted she knew exactly how to manipulate the system's biases to her advantage. Nevertheless, Ryan refused to be cowed. He took a steadying breath and retrieved his phone from his pocket. There was no reason for him to hide or to become passive. If the police were coming, he would greet them with the truth, and, crucially, evidence. Flicking on his phone's camera, he stepped a few feet back to capture both Allison and the mailbox. "Excuse me," he said, trying to keep his voice calm despite the roiling tension inside. "Since you've decided to call the police, I'm going to record this for my own protection." Allison shot him a hostile glare. "Really? Now you're the one filming me?" She let out a short, sarcastic laugh. "Fine. Record away. I've got nothing to hide." Ryan frowned. "Then you'll understand why I'm doing this. You've already twisted the story once, and I won't let you do it again." He aimed the camera so it showed her entire figure, making sure to include the hammered metal digits she had placed on the mailbox. "Could you repeat what you were telling 911, he asked, voice steady. "That I'm harassing you on my own property?" Allison's eyes narrowed. "I told them you were stopping me from correcting a city mistake, and you refused to let me leave until I did it." "Which is not true," Ryan countered, aiming the lens at himself for a moment to capture his response. "I simply asked you to show some official authorization. When you refused, I told you to stop tampering with my mailbox." Her lips twisted into a thin line. "You just don't want to accept the city's correction." "Typical. And now you're playing the victim, recording me like I'm a criminal." Ryan forced himself not to flinch at her words. He had seen how quickly such encounters could spiral in countless viral videos, many of which ended in tragedy. He wasn't about to become another statistic, another cautionary tale. His best recourse was to remain calm, factual, and firmly grounded in the truth. "Allison Whitmore, correct?" he said, ensuring he captured her face. "You're claiming you work for the city, but you won't show me any valid ID. And now you've called the police on me for standing in my own driveway." Allison turned her head away, crossing her arms. "Believe what you want," she muttered. "We'll see what the cops say when they get here." Ryan ended the recording, saving the file in multiple locations just in case. He considered making a quick call to a friend, perhaps someone who could come stand by him as a witness. But he didn't have time. Sirens in the distance signaled that the police were closer than he expected. His pulse quickened at the sound. There was no turning back now. He darted a glance up the street and saw the faint glow of rotating lights. On any normal day, the sight might have filled him with relief, trusting law enforcement to uphold fairness. But in this moment, dread warred with that trust. He was all too aware of the narratives that might instantly color an officer's perception. Clenching his phone in one hand, Ryan turned to face Allison, who stood confidently near the curb, as though anticipating a triumphant victory. "Just remember," he said quietly, "whatever story you try to spin, I have everything documented." She gave a mirthless smile. "So do I." Another wave of apprehension rippled through Ryan. What if her recordings or phone calls were selectively edited? What if the first impressions of the responding officers were shaped by her frantic words about an aggressive homeowner? The distant sirens grew louder, accompanied by the glow of headlights. Cars from neighboring streets slowed to watch, their occupants likely wondering what was happening at number 22 so late at night. Ryan swallowed hard, steeling himself for the encounter. He prayed his calm composure, combined with his video evidence, would be enough to ensure that the officers saw the real story. Ryan Baxter could hear his own heartbeat drumming in his ears as he stood in his driveway. The rotating red and blue lights from the approaching police cruiser cast alternating shadows on the pavement, making the scene look even more dramatic than it already was. Clutching his phone, he hit the record button again. He needed to ensure that every second from here on out was documented. Allison Whitmore, meanwhile, maintained her stance near the mailbox, arms folded tight. Her earlier smugness had given way to a guarded tension. Perhaps she realized that once the officers arrived, she'd need to defend whatever story she'd spun during her 911 call. A single patrol car pulled up first, parking at the curb with the engine idling. Two officers emerged, a middle-aged woman with a calm demeanor and a younger man who looked fresh out of the academy. Their badges gleamed under the hazy glow of the street lamp. Ryan felt a surge of relief that there were two of them. Maybe that meant a better chance at balanced listening, at least in theory. Allison wasted no time. She hurried over to them, words spilling out in a torrent. "Officer, thank goodness you're here. I'm trying to do a simple correction for the city, and this man is harassing me. He won't let me leave, and he's been intimidating me on his property." Her voice dripped with feigned distress, and if he hadn't witnessed her earlier confidence, Ryan might have believed she was genuinely frightened. The female officer held up a hand to slow Allison's barrage. "Ma'am, calm down. We need to understand the situation clearly. Let's start with your name and see some identification, please." Allison thrust her business card at the officer, repeating the same claim about working for municipal consulting. The officer glanced at the card, flipping it over as though searching for an official seal or some municipal stamp. Finding none, she looked up. "This doesn't appear to be formal identification or city credentials. Do you have any official ID from the city?" Allison hesitated, fiddling with the collar of her blazer. "Not on me," she admitted. "But this is a legitimate mistake the city made with addresses. I was told to correct it." The younger officer stepped forward, scanning the scene. "And you're Ryan Baxter?" he asked, making eye contact with Ryan. "We got a call about a homeowner refusing to let someone do city business. Is that you?" Ryan nodded, holding up his phone. "Yes, I'm Ryan Baxter. I live here at 22 Greenbrook Trail. I have video footage of her removing my house number and refusing to provide any real documentation." "May we see the footage?" the officer asked, glancing at the phone. Ryan immediately pulled up the video he'd taken, a series of short clips capturing Allison prying off the digits, then hurling her accusations. The audio was clear enough to catch her claims of being threatened. As they watched, the female officer's brow furrowed. "Ma'am," she said, turning to Allison, "it looks like you removed part of the homeowner's property without consent and claimed you had city authority to do so. But you haven't shown us any credentials." Allison's eyes flashed. "That's because the city is behind on their official IDs. It's not my fault. And he was intimidating me. I only called because I feared for my safety." Ryan fought the urge to roll his eyes at her manufactured victimhood. Instead, he steadily addressed the officers. "I never threatened her. I only asked for documentation. She insisted on changing my address in the middle of the night. Wouldn't you question that?" The younger officer sighed, exchanging a quick look with his partner. "Ms. Whitmore," he said, "I understand you might be acting in good faith, but without proper ID or official paperwork, you can't just show up at a private residence and alter property. And based on the recording, it doesn't sound like Mr. Baxter threatened you." Allison's face darkened. "He blocked me from doing my job." The female officer gently shook her head. "From what we see here, it's his address and his mailbox. If you don't have evidence of your municipal authority, you're effectively trespassing and tampering with private property." Ryan could almost taste the tension in the air. He recorded the entire exchange on his phone, ensuring he had a backup of every word. Should Allison try to twist the narrative again, this footage would serve as his shield. With a sigh, the officer handed Allison's card back. We'll file a report on the incident. Ms. Whitmore, we strongly advise you to leave the premises for now. If there truly is a city mandate, you'll have to return with documented proof or arrange an official visit during reasonable hours. As for the 911 call, calling under false pretenses is a serious matter. Please be mindful of that. Allison looked as though she might argue further, but the pointedness in the officer's gaze dissuaded her. She offered Ryan a withering glance before turning on her heel. Mumbling under her breath, she headed to a nearby sedan parked under a tree. The female officer followed for a moment, presumably to confirm her name and license plate details. Ryan stayed by the mailbox, heart still thumping. The younger officer approached him, returning the phone. "I'm sorry about the inconvenience, sir. We'll note in our report that you did nothing aggressive or illegal. If you have any further issues with her, don't hesitate to give us a call." Ryan nodded, relief flooding in. "Thank you, officer. I appreciate it." Within minutes, the police presence diminished. Allison's car pulled away, the patrol car trailing behind. Ryan stood alone in the driveway, the half-removed number still lying in the grass. For a long moment, he simply stared at it, letting the gravity of what had happened sink in. He'd managed to defend his property without the situation spiraling into something worse, a blessing, given how quickly things could have escalated. He gathered the metal digit from the ground, turning it over in his hand. A wave of exhaustion hit him anew. The day had been long before this fiasco even began. But at least he had recorded everything and come away with his address intact, albeit a bit battered. Unaware that his actions would soon ripple far beyond this quiet block, Ryan carefully placed the damaged house number on his porch table and headed inside, mind already bracing for whatever aftermath might follow. Ryan Baxter awoke the next morning with a dull headache and a sense of lingering dread. The events of the previous night played in his mind on repeat: Allison Whitmore's arrival, her insistence on changing his address, the police intervention, and the recording he'd taken that seemed to tip the balance in his favor. As he sipped his coffee, he wondered what ripple effects might follow. True to the officer's word, Ryan received a call from the local precinct midday. The voice on the other end belonged to Sergeant Patel, who introduced himself as the officer handling the official report. "I've reviewed the statements from the two responding officers," Patel explained in a measured tone, "and we've also looked at your video. It's quite clear that Ms. Whitmore had no legal standing to alter your address. She also made questionable claims about feeling threatened." Ryan exhaled, a slight relief washing over him. "Thank you for taking the time to look into it, Sergeant. I was worried that her story might overshadow mine." Sergeant Patel let out a short, wry laugh. "We see a lot of tall tales. Fortunately, your video gave us something concrete. Based on what we have, we've issued Ms. Whitmore a written warning for trespassing and illegal property tampering. If she attempts to approach your mailbox again without proper documentation, she could face charges." Grateful, Ryan thanked him and ended the call. The confirmation that Allison would be on thin ice if she tried anything again offered some reassurance. Still, he couldn't quite shake the memory of her threats or the tension he felt when she dialed 911. That evening, as Ryan settled into his living room, a knock on the door startled him. With cautious steps, he peered through the peephole, half expecting Allison. Instead, he saw a familiar face, Marcus, a neighbor from a few houses down. Marcus had apparently noticed the police car in front of Ryan's house the previous night and wanted to check in. "Hey, man," Marcus said softly when Ryan opened the door. "Everything okay here? I saw flashing lights and someone messing with your mailbox." Ryan invited him inside, telling him the whole story. Marcus listened with a mix of disbelief and indignation. "That's wild," he exclaimed. "I'd never heard of the city coming out in the middle of the night for something like that. Did she really say she had official permission?" Ryan nodded, handing him a still frame from the video, Allison's face partially lit by the porch light, her hand holding a hammered digit. "Yup, that's her. She had no real ID, just some questionable business card." Marcus shook his head. Man, that's messed up. I'm glad you stood your ground and recorded everything. That theme of recording everything would prove vital in the days ahead. Ryan's sense of caution pushed him to upload his phone videos to a private online folder, just in case. He also wrote a brief post in the neighborhood's online forum, alerting others to the incident and advising them to be wary of anyone claiming to change addresses without proper authorization. He didn't expect much of a response, but within hours, the post garnered a flurry of reactions. Neighbors weighed in with comments like, "So that's who I saw walking around last night," and "Glad you filmed it." People like that rely on intimidation. One or two asked for more details, wanting to ensure the same thing didn't happen to them. Ryan answered as best he could, also reiterating that the police had issued a warning to Allison. A few folks mentioned that they recognized her from the local real estate scene. Apparently, she had been advertising city lot improvements or administrative solutions for a while, though no one seemed to have direct experience with her. It was at this point that a user named Civic Crusader posted a curious comment: "I think I know about this woman. She's not who she says she is. Heard rumors she's involved in shady property manipulations." The cryptic nature of the comment piqued Ryan's interest. But beyond that, the thread soon quieted down, overshadowed by routine neighborhood chatter. Meanwhile, the original police officers who had responded to Ryan's home remained in contact. They told him that if Allison tried to return or if any further conflicts arose, he should call immediately. Ryan couldn't decide whether to feel safer with that knowledge or unsettled by the potential for another confrontation. For a few days, life settled into a semblance of normalcy. He attended work, kept up with errands, and tried to rest. But at odd moments, like when he collected the mail or took out the trash, he'd glance at the newly reattached 22 on his mailbox and shudder at the memory of Allison's hammer in the night. He didn't realize then that the storm had only begun to gather. The seeds of her bizarre actions that evening would soon sprout into a much larger scandal, fueled by the curiosity of neighbors and the unstoppable force of social media. For now, though, Ryan breathed a tentative sigh of relief, believing the matter might just blow over quietly. That belief was short-lived. A call from a local reporter, a flurry of social media comments, and the slow unraveling of Allison's real motives would soon catapult Ryan's quiet block into unexpected limelight. Yet, in the midst of that, he remained grounded in one abiding truth: standing firm and documenting every encounter had kept him on the right side of the story so far. The first inkling Ryan Baxter had that the incident was escalating far beyond his quiet neighborhood came when a former college friend messaged him on social media. "Dude," the friend wrote, "is that you in the viral video? Saw it on a local news page." Confusion flickered through Ryan. Sure, he'd posted something in the neighborhood forum, but that was hardly viral material. Curious, he clicked the link his friend provided, only to find a local media outlet's Facebook post featuring a short video snippet from his own phone recordings. The caption read, "Late-night address tampering, local homeowner confronts alleged city worker." Within minutes, Ryan scrolled through hundreds of comments. Some were supportive, praising his calm demeanor; others criticized Allison Whitmore, pointing out how suspicious her actions were. But what caught his eye most were the threads unraveling about Allison herself. People claimed they'd seen her in other viral confrontations, some referencing racial bias or unscrupulous property deals. One comment read, "This same woman tried something similar on my block, demanded to see my deed." Another alleged that Allison had been captured on camera making inflammatory remarks toward a different homeowner of color. A sense of disbelief warred with an uneasy recognition. He recalled how she used coded language during her 911 call, painting him as aggressive. Perhaps this was part of a larger pattern. The more Ryan read, the more it became evident that Allison's behavior wasn't an isolated event. She had a track record of targeting specific homeowners. Some even claimed she used threats of calling the authorities to force them into compliance. Then, the breakthrough post appeared, a user stating that Allison Whitmore wasn't her real name. She was, in fact, someone named Marjorie Callahan, a real estate agent operating under multiple aliases. The user posted screenshots of a LinkedIn profile, plus a link to an old press release about a real estate firm. Sure enough, the headshot matched Allison's face. Within days, the story gained traction. Neighborhood pages, local watchdog groups, and even a city politics subreddit picked it up. They highlighted how Allison/Marjorie used fear and confusion to manipulate property owners, falsely claiming municipal authority or forging official notices to achieve her real goal, controlling certain properties or causing chaos that could lead to forced sales. The final nail in Allison's, or Marjorie's, professional coffin came when a major local news station aired a segment. They interviewed a couple who alleged that she had pressured them to sign fraudulent paperwork. Shortly after, Ryan's phone pinged incessantly with updates. The real estate agency that employed her had issued a statement confirming they had parted ways. Allegations of unethical conduct led to her firing. Despite the flood of new information, Ryan felt a strange mix of relief and disquiet. It was reassuring to see that the broader community recognized Allison's wrongdoing, particularly her racial targeting, but it was sobering to realize just how dangerous her manipulations had been. If he hadn't recorded her that night, who knows how many more homeowners she might have conned or intimidated. Meanwhile, the video featuring Ryan's calm insistence that she show proper documentation now had tens of thousands of views. Commentators lauded his demeanor, calling him the homeowner who refused to back down. But not all the attention was positive. A handful of trolls accused him of exploiting the situation for fame or overreacting to a simple misunderstanding. Ryan tried not to engage, understanding how internet discourse could spiral. His workplace also caught wind of it. During a lunch break, his boss, Ms. Powell, approached him gently. "Hey, Ryan, I saw that video circulating. I just wanted to check in and make sure you're all right. Must have been stressful." Ryan nodded, relieved at the show of support. "It was. But I'm okay now, just trying to handle all the fallout." Ms. Powell assured him the company stood by him, even offering to refer him to legal assistance if the matter escalated. Grateful, Ryan realized how fortunate he was. Others targeted by Allison might not have had a supportive employer or the means to gather evidence. As the days wore on, media interest grew, then ebbed. People moved on to the next story, while the deeper truth about Allison's past, her string of racially charged confrontations, remained accessible for anyone who cared to look. Ryan suspected that for Allison, now widely revealed as Marjorie, rebuilding her public image would be next to impossible. Although he took no glee in seeing someone's career implode, he couldn't ignore how her downfall stemmed from her own malice. She had preyed upon vulnerable people, used intimidation, and manipulated racial stereotypes. Ryan found solace in the knowledge that by filming her and refusing to be bullied, he had played a small part in preventing further harm. In the quiet moments, he wrestled with conflicting emotions. Part of him felt vindicated, he hadn't been wrong to stand firm. Another part felt unsettled by how quickly a personal confrontation could balloon into a public scandal. He'd come away from it more cautious, more aware of the dark undercurrents lurking in everyday interactions. Little did he know, there was still more to uncover. The viral exposure had triggered an avalanche of new leads, sending investigative reporters and concerned citizens digging into Allison's network of deceit. Soon, the full extent of her wrongdoing would come to light, adding layers of betrayal and injustice to an already shocking saga. In the weeks following Allison Whitmore's exposure as Marjorie Callahan, Ryan Baxter felt as though he were living in a strange dream. News outlets, both local and national, picked up on the unfolding drama. At first, they focused on the tension-laced video of Allison forcibly altering Ryan's house number. Then they expanded their coverage to include interviews and testimonies from others who had encountered her property consultancy ruse. Yet the story took an even darker turn when investigative journalists dug deeper. A prominent local paper published an article that alleged Allison, or Marjorie, maybe both were aliases, was actually Bethany Reynolds, a figure rumored to be the mastermind behind a sophisticated fraud ring. The group's modus operandi. identifying elderly or otherwise vulnerable homeowners, often in minority neighborhoods, and persuading them that there were legal errors with their property deeds. Once trust was established, the group pressured the owners into signing away partial ownership or paying hefty administration fees for non-existent corrections. Ryan read the article in stunned silence one evening, the words feeling simultaneously distant and horrifying. He recognized the patterns described, the false sense of urgency, the implied authority, and the cunning mixture of intimidation and official-sounding jargon. Bethany Reynolds, like many con artists, had exploited prejudices and systemic issues to further her scams. The piece even highlighted how her racism played a role, as she zeroed in on people of color she believed would be too afraid to question her. The allegations painted Bethany as a shapeshifter of sorts, someone who'd vanish under one alias only to re-emerge with a fresh identity. Property records from multiple states revealed a trail of forgery and manipulation. Subtle enough to avoid immediate detection, yet brazen when cornered, Bethany had been able to skip town or change names whenever law enforcement got too close. Ryan's phone buzzed incessantly. Friends and acquaintances forwarded him links to exposés, each more shocking than the last. Some expressed outrage that she'd targeted older black homeowners who'd already faced generational economic disadvantages. Others marveled at how she managed to slip through legal cracks for so long. Amid the whirlwind of new information, Ryan couldn't help feeling a creeping sense of unease and gratitude. If he hadn't recorded her that night, if he hadn't stood his ground, who knew how long she would have continued preying on unsuspecting families. He also realized how easily he, too, could have been roped into her scheme if he hadn't been cautious. The online neighborhood forums lit up with debates. Some posters shared stories of receiving strange flyers or unannounced visits from property consultants, though no one had realized the seriousness of it. Others expressed guilt for having brushed off these encounters as mere annoyances. A collective vigilance emerged, a determination to spread awareness so that Bethany, or anyone following her methods, couldn't strike again. Meanwhile, local authorities confirmed they were actively investigating Bethany's network. Rumors swirled about shell companies, offshore bank accounts, and complicit notaries who turned a blind eye to forgeries. The more pieces came to light, the more the puzzle revealed a chilling portrait of systematic exploitation. Ryan soon found himself contacted by an investigator from the city's Financial Crimes Division. "We understand you had a run-in with Ms. Reynolds." Under the alias Allison Whitmore, the investigator said over the phone. "Your video might be crucial in establishing her pattern of intimidation. Would you be willing to come in for a statement?" Though wary of stepping deeper into the legal quagmire, Ryan agreed. He met the investigator in a nondescript office building, answering questions about the night Allison showed up. He provided the complete video footage. In return, he learned more about Bethany's extensive reach and her multiple run-ins with the law, none of which had yet resulted in a decisive conviction. Afterwards, Ryan left the building with mixed feelings. On one hand, he felt a moral imperative to help stop someone who'd weaponized racism and deceit for profit. On the other, the scale of her wrongdoing was daunting. Could his single piece of evidence really tip the balance, or was Bethany too practiced at evading justice? That question lingered as the investigation picked up steam. Media outlets kept digging. Victims who had previously been too scared or ashamed to speak out now stepped forward, buoyed by a sense that momentum was finally turning against Bethany. At the same time, the real estate firm that fired her distanced itself from the scandal, issuing public statements of regret for not vetting her more thoroughly. In his quieter moments, Ryan wrestled with the ugliness of it all. It was one thing to confront a pushy intruder at night, it was another to realize that intruder represented a much broader threat, a system of exploitation preying on the marginalized. His frustration grew at the notion that she'd been able to operate for so long, using race and fear as tools for her own gain. Amid the swirl of developments, Ryan held on to a sliver of hope. Maybe, with enough pressure from media and law enforcement, Bethany's ring of fraud would finally collapse. And maybe that night, standing under the porch light, phone in hand, he'd unwittingly played a part in bringing a predatory scheme to an end. Still, the final chapter had yet to unfold. As public outcry intensified, and more victims emerged from the shadows, the noose around Bethany Reynolds, and her labyrinth of aliases, tightened. Ryan could only wait, watch, and cooperate where he could, uncertain of whether justice would triumph or if she would slip away yet again. Ryan Baxter sat at his kitchen table, refreshing the news site on his laptop for what felt like the 100th time that day. A bold headline finally appeared: alleged fraudster Bethany Reynolds arrested, multiple charges filed. His breath caught in his throat. After weeks of speculation and mounting rumors, it was finally official. According to the article, Bethany had been taken into custody early that morning. Investigators, armed with evidence collected from numerous victims, had enough to charge her with fraud, conspiracy, and various other offenses related to her property scheme. The piece specifically cited Ryan's video footage as a turning point that had spurred wider attention and spurred more victims to speak up. He scrolled further, heart pounding. Statements from law enforcement praised community vigilance, highlighting how everyday citizens stepping forward with recordings could help unravel complex crimes. One officer noted, without the recorded evidence and witness testimonials, apprehending Ms. Reynolds might have proved far more difficult. For Ryan, the sense of relief was almost overwhelming. He closed his eyes, letting the realization sink in. The woman who had tried to rewrite his address at night and invoked the police under false claims was now facing tangible consequences. Gone were her days of slipping through legal cracks under aliases. The facade Allison Whitmore had used to manipulate homeowners had fallen apart. Even so, a strange heaviness tempered his relief. A life was unraveling, albeit one built on lies and exploitation. He couldn't ignore the string of real harm she'd inflicted: the elderly homeowners swindled out of their savings, the families misled into surrendering their property rights, and the threat of racial intimidation that had hovered over it all. In a sense, her downfall felt more like a necessary tragedy than a celebratory event. That night, as he wandered through the quiet house at 22 Greenbrook Trail, Ryan let his thoughts drift to the chain of events that had brought them here. A single confrontation with a stranger prying off his mailbox digits had led to an expose of a larger crime operation. Had he not insisted on proof, had he not filmed the incident, perhaps Bethany Reynolds would have continued her schemes unabated. Standing by the window, he peered at the darkened street outside. The mailbox gleamed under the porch light, digits firmly secured at 22. In that moment, he felt a subtle shift, an acknowledgement that although the experience had shaken him, it had also reaffirmed the power of vigilance and truth. In the coming days, the media would delve into Bethany's trial, her associates, and the consequences awaiting her. For Ryan, though, the immediate storm had passed. He wasn't naive, he knew the legal process would take time, and the outcome wasn't guaranteed. But for now, he could breathe easier, knowing that the authorities had taken a crucial step toward justice. In the months that followed Bethany Reynolds' arrest, the story faded from the front pages. Ryan Baxter, however, felt its echoes daily. He'd catch himself hesitating whenever a stranger rang his doorbell or whenever he glimpsed a figure near his property at night. The unsettling memory of that confrontation lingered, a reminder of how quickly safety could be upended. Yet amid the leftover unease, Ryan discovered an unexpected reservoir of hope. Neighbors who once simply waved politely now stopped to chat, offering kind words or asking if he needed anything. Online, individuals from other communities thanked him for shedding light on property scams they'd never realized were happening in their own backyards. Each note of support, each message of thanks, slowly knit together a sense that he wasn't alone in confronting the ugly undercurrents of fraud and prejudice. Encouraged by this response, Ryan began to speak out more openly. He updated his neighborhood forum posts, outlining resources for reporting suspicious property activities. He collaborated with a local community group to host small workshops on knowing your property rights, focusing especially on older residents and marginalized homeowners who might be prime targets for similar schemes. Public speaking didn't come naturally to him, he was used to quiet routines and solitary hobbies. But the moral conviction spurred him on. At one of these workshops, an elderly couple tearfully approached him, admitting they'd nearly fallen for a deed-related scam. "Your story gave us the courage to question things," they said, gratitude shining in their eyes. That moment crystallized the realization that sometimes, personal trials could spark communal resilience. Over time, the nightmares receded. Ryan's sense of hypervigilance softened into mere caution. And while the experience had taught him not to trust blindly, it also showed him the significance of standing up for oneself, and for others, when confronted by injustice. Occasionally, reporters checking on Bethany Reynolds's legal proceedings reached out for a comment. Ryan kept his statements brief. He hoped for a fair trial and believed the evidence would speak for itself. Privately, he wished for some semblance of closure for everyone harmed by her manipulative schemes. He couldn't forget the racial implications of that night. Reflecting on how quickly she had weaponized stereotypes, he recognized that his calm approach and documentation had been crucial. Thus, in his newfound public platform, Ryan also touched on the importance of confronting racial biases in policing and everyday interactions. "Our personal vigilance," he'd say, "is part of a larger fight against systemic injustice." Standing on his porch one cool evening, Ryan gazed at the sturdy digits, 22, still securely fixed to his mailbox. A gentle breeze carried the faint smell of freshly cut grass. In that quiet moment, he felt a subdued yet powerful sense of peace. Life might bring more challenges, more unexpected tests of resolve, but he now knew the power of truth, community support, and unwavering self-advocacy. Yes, the confrontation had left scars, but from those scars came renewed purpose. And as he stepped inside, locking the door behind him, Ryan Baxter found himself stepping forward, toward healing, toward unity, and toward a future lit by the hard-won understanding that standing for justice could illuminate paths for many beyond his own front yard.